Hi, I'm Matt, and welcome to CData Arc. I'm going to show you how to integrate your e-commerce data into automated data pipelines. So let's get started. Arc includes dedicated e-commerce connectors for specific platforms like Shopify, BigCommerce, and Magento. These connectors support bidirectional integration with your e-commerce data, so you can push or pull data from your e-commerce platform as part of a centralized automated data solution. Each connector shares the same interface and design, so while I'll use Shopify as the example for this video, you can apply the same concepts regardless of your preferred platform. To start working with an e-commerce connector like Shopify, I'll drag it from the toolbox into the canvas to create an instance in the flow. Now let's start using this connector to talk to Shopify by establishing a connection. Since I haven't already configured a connection to Shopify, this connection dropdown is empty, and I'll need to create one. In the connection creation panel, I'll use a basic authentication scheme and copy in my URL, my app ID, and my password. Now I'll give these connection parameters a name so that Arc will remember them and let me reuse these parameters in future Shopify connectors. Okay, let's test this new connection and make sure that we can talk to Shopify. Great. Now we need to set an action, which determines how this connector will interact with our Shopify data. The two most common actions are upsert, which is pushing data to Shopify, and select, which is pulling data from Shopify into the Arc flow. Let's work with select for now. Now, we need to know which table or object in Shopify contains the data that we want to work with. For example, let's say we want to pull order information into the flow, so that when a customer orders something through our Shopify storefront, we want that order information visible here in Arc. This connector knows all of the tables or objects available in Shopify, so I can just select the order table here to work with it. These columns show each of the properties of an order in Shopify, and for now I'll leave them all enabled for simplicity. When you're pulling data from your e-commerce platform, it's likely that you'll want some filters or conditions, so you're not pulling the entire table each time. You can add simple logical conditions in the filters pane here. For example, maybe I only want to pull orders for a specific customer. More commonly, the filter that you want is to only ever process new or updated orders. That way you don't process an order more than once. And the connector supports two different ways of only processing new or updated data. The first uses a flag column, and the second uses a timestamp. A flag column is just a value that's either true or false. For example, maybe you have a column called isProcessed, and you only want to pull data for orders where isProcessed is false. You can specify in the connector which column to use as this flag column, and Arc will do two things. First, it will only pull orders where that column is false, and second, it will update that column to true after it's been processed so that the same record is not processed again. The second method uses a timestamp to process new or changed records. Arc knows the last time that it asked Shopify for data, so if an order's created at time or last modified time is more recent than Arc's latest polling attempt, well then that order must be new, and thus we should process it. The only thing that you need to do is tell the connector which column to check for this timestamp comparison. Now let's see what it looks like when we test this connector. I'll go into the Output tab and press the Receive button to manually pull data down from Shopify. Since I haven't applied any filters, it will take a few moments here for the data to transfer over the wire. Alright, now that we've received our order data from Shopify, let's see what it looks like. As you can see, this order data is stored in an XML file, where each XML tag contains a column from our order table in Shopify. XML is an important data format in Arc, since all major data transformation and manipulation operations take XML input and produce XML output. So the fact that our order data is already in XML makes it easier to map, translate, and integrate with other systems using Arc. Notice that there are order items objects within our orders object, because the Shopify connector is smart enough to understand the relationship between orders and order items in Shopify. After all, it's not very useful to pull data for an order, but not know the line items associated with that order. The connector correlates the order with the line items automatically for your convenience. Let's return to Arc now and view the Automation tab of the connector. I just manually pulled order data from Shopify, but of course the value of Arc is tied to the ability to automate e-commerce integration. When Receive Automation is enabled, Arc will look for new Shopify data automatically according to the interval that you configure here. The Send Automation option ensures that Arc automatically processes data that should be pushed into Shopify from within an Arc pipeline. And that's all you need to know to get started using Arc's e-commerce connectors. Okay, so we know how to use the e-commerce connectors, But in order to maximize the value of these connectors, it's important to understand how they interact with other connectors in the flow. We already saw that e-commerce data is formatted as XML in Arc, and this is also true for database connectors like SQL Server or EDI connectors like X12. Thus, we frequently need to map between different XML structures. That is, we need to convert the XML from our e-commerce platform into an XML format that we can use to generate an EDI file or maybe insert into SQL Server. The Xml Map Connector is the workhorse data transformation connector in Arc. This connector reads the format of our Shopify data, reads the format of our SQL Server table, and then displays them here in the Visual Designer. From there, we can drag the values from the left onto the right to establish a mapping relationship. In other words, this value from our e-commerce platform should be mapped into this column in our SQL Server table. Mapping specifics range from simple to complex, so the details for advanced mapping projects extend beyond the scope of this video. The important thing to understand is that you can use the Xml Map Connector to integrate your e-commerce data with other connectors in the flow, whether those connectors are for backend systems like a database or for file formats like EDI. And that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and as always, you can find more resources at arc.cdata.com.